In whatever I do nowadays, I always try to be kind, present, and open. And those are the big three. And I use it in my coaching practice. I use it in my leadership workshops. I use it with my wife. I use it becoming a dad in 3 months when everything goes according to plan. Breaking those three things down, being kind is really all about self-acceptance and acknowledging that we have value and potential, and not only ourselves, but also other people. Then being present is all about what's going on with me right now, emotions, events, else, and also the people around me, the people that are important to me. Maybe the person that just snapped at me at the Starbucks, they are angry because they have a problem at home, right? So let's not rush to judgment, but give them the benefit of the doubt and be kind with them as well, because we don't know what's going on in their life. And being open is all about putting the change into action, right? So now that we have this clarity, now that we have this insight, what are the small iterative steps that we can do to step by step become that version of ourselves that achieves all these great things that we want for ourselves as simply as a consequence of who they are.
Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. If you're new, I'm your host, Nicole Nguyen, and this is your go-to self-development podcast where we envision living our best lives, ones filled with unlimited possibilities, by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. If you're returning back, a very warm welcome, EnvisionAir. I'm so happy that you're here, and I cannot wait for you and I today to listen, learn, and grow together. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
Today, we have a very insightful topic to discuss, which I hope that none of you is having to go through right now. But if you are, please know that you're not alone, and I know this episode is going to be really helpful. Today, we're going to be talking about building resilience through redundancies and restructures. Over the last few years, we have seen significant changes in the market, and many industries have contracted. And as a result, there have been so many corporate restructures and redundancies that have followed. This is why I'm really happy that we have Benedikt Oehmen as a guest on the EnvisionAir podcast. And Benedikt is an author and a career transition coach. He's dedicated to helping professionals survive redundancies, also known as layoffs, and he is committed to helping them to forge their own path towards security with purpose. Benedikt's journey began when he faced his own series of layoffs at his old company where he was managing a team. And he had been at this company for 17 years, and he was managing this team of 7. And unfortunately, he was told about layoffs being implemented. Through his journey, Benedikt developed a unique approach to helping professionals navigate career transitions. And it's encapsulated in what he calls the Big 3 framework. So we're going to be diving into this and much more on today's podcast. So Benedikt, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here and talk about resilience with you, among other topics. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun for sure. Well, let's start with your own personal story because you experienced firsthand a corporate restructuring, redundancies during your time at your old company. Do you want to share with the listeners your journey of going through a very difficult transition and how you got to where you are now?
Sure, of course. So I was working with that company, Blizzard Entertainment, for 17 years. It was really the first company where I had a job after my studies, and it became like a second family to me. It's Blizzard was known back in the day for making these amazing games made by gamers for gamers, And it really had this kinship between everybody that you met there and that you worked with. So I was very lucky and fortunate that I got to be there for 17 years. But then in 2018, they announced that in the European office based in Versailles, France, they announced that they needed to do a reduction in force of 30%. And that was a shock, right? Because we are all very close with one another, and then imagining saying goodbye to a third of the people in your life, that was quite tough. And so then in 2018, it was announced and then actually implemented in 2019, because in France also you have to go through a specific set of regulations before you can reduce staff in such a capacity. Okay. And so that was very tough. But on the plus side, I could almost say, like, Blizzard gave people the opportunity to say, like, hey, if you want to leave on your own volition, you get a package, right? And then people left proactively as well. But we still had to restructure how we were working, doing more with less people and learning also how to do things differently, because my team, I was in publishing and community management, where I had a team of 7 community managers for the different languages. And after the restructure, that team was entirely gone. There was only one person left for all these responsibilities. And at that point, I decided, no, I still want to work with teams and help others succeed. And that's where I changed from a publishing environment to a production environment with our localization team. And that, unfortunately, was only the first event, because then after that implementation, and we were 30% less people than in 2020, a year later, they announced, okay, now we have to close the office for good. Like, everybody got to go at this point. And that again took another year before that was implemented. But it made it even harder on the people having this knowledge that, like, oh, this is coming to an end, and what I've known as my second home will be no more, no matter how much I wish for it. And then you're in this tricky position of, like, okay, what am I going to do now, right? How am I preparing myself for a time after Blizzard while still doing my job for a year? And that was really the environment that my team and I and everybody else in the Versailles office found themselves in 2020. So
what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as a team leader? Because, it was there was a drawn out period of time, which again has benefits, because as you mentioned, it's element of protection for employees to decide, whether they want to stay or go. It also helps probably the business to actually decide whether the redundancies are actually necessary. But what were some of the challenges that you faced as the team lead, not only for yourself, leading a team that basically eventually disappeared, but also with the employees as well?
Yeah, so definitely on a management or leadership side, one of the challenges was I didn't have any more information than my team had, right? So I couldn't tell them anything more than what they heard already, which, like, if I would have had more information, I would have shared it immediately, right? But as a leader, people look to you for answers and to help fix stuff. And in that moment, you couldn't, because that was completely outside of your control that this restructuring was happening. So for me, one of the biggest challenges was then really to sit down with everybody and say, like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. Our team might go unchanged. It's unlikely, but it is a possibility. And worst case, our team is no more. So let's look at the worst case. Like, what other things do you want to do in your life other than the job you're doing right now, right? Where do you want to go after Blizzard if it really comes to an end? And what can we do right now to help you prepare for that eventuality, that when it hits, you're not completely helpless, right? But you have a strategy, you have a goal, and you already put action into place to get you to the next opportunity, right? And getting the team into that mindset was also a big challenge, because everybody grieves at different speeds, right? So the 5 stages of grief in that sense are very real, where people first like, oh, I can't believe this is happening, and then there's a bargaining, and all the way through to acceptance, and then thriving on the other end, right? And as a team lead, you need to be very conscious of that every team member goes through that at their own pace, with their own challenges, with their own restrictions. Maybe somebody just bought a house, or they became a parent, and there's a whole bunch of other things going on in the background. And they really, really wanted to stay with Blizzard for life if they could, right? So it's really an individual, like, in addition to your own journey and figuring it out for yourself, you have to do it with everybody in your team, with these 7 other people at the same time. So that definitely for me was the biggest challenge to get that all equaled out and under one umbrella. And then, as you said, like, it was a blessing and a curse that we have that year, because it gave us the time to prepare, but it also, it didn't make it any better to be in this
fluctuation.
Yeah, in this. You don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, uncertainty.
In limbo, uncertainty and limbo.
Yes,
Exactly. And that just adds this psychological pressure as well, a little bit, and especially to your team. And then also from a pure managerial point of view, what is a challenge is if your company offers, hey, like, people, if you want to leave proactively, you can, and then that's how we fill our 30%. All of a sudden, people leave that, oh, those guys were really carrying the department and getting stuff done. They will be really, really hard to replace, and we can't replace them because we still need to reduce people. So the weird thing with that is the people who are the most employable with the best skills that will land on their feet, they are the ones that will leave first, making it even harder on the rest who stay to pick up the slack, so to say, right? To, again, deliver more with less. So getting through that transition is only the first step, as I then found out, because then when you're with a new team, you have this survivor skill all of a sudden, like all your friends are gone, you're still here. And you realize the company is not like, yeah, now that we had a reduction in force, we expect 30% less output. Like, no, they expect the same output. So you have to do more with less people. And then you get into these challenges of potential burnout and follow-up problems and challenges with individuals that do not know how to cope with this new set of responsibilities, because your job description also changed, because all of a sudden, instead of doing stuff in-house, we have to work with agencies, and we have to manage those and negotiate and all those kind of things. So that's all stuff people have not necessarily done before, and then needed to find their way into relatively quickly, because we still had the goals that we had for the end of the year, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, let's go back to the first stage, because you said a lot of really interesting points there. And from what you've said, what I heard is that you almost did like a reverse engineering in some ways of like, let's start with the worst case scenario rather than, which was so interesting because that stance was really insightful. And I think if you go to that place in your mind, and you said it, mindset, so you're helping your staff, your team, your employees that you're managing, you're helping them to actually get into the right mindset to say, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? And so I have 2 questions on that. One, like, is that the directive that you got from your higher above people, or is that something that you just kind of intuitively knew because you had been, reading or, fine tuning your own leadership skills? And the second question I have is, how did that look practically? Were you actually, setting up one-to-ones with each of the team and sort of almost coaching them through this period and trying to understand what is the worst case scenario and essentially what they want from this situation?
So for the first question, it's nothing that anybody told me to do. It was more like instinct, because like, hey, if we're prepared for the worst case, then that implies we are prepared for all the better cases as well, right? So for me, it was just a very logical step to look at that and say, like, if that's the thing that's going to happen, what is within our power, what we can do about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the reduction in force, so for the first one, the 30%, it was, I think we started more in a group setting, and everybody, like, after the initial shock was like, okay, like, what are we going to do now? And a good chunk of the team proactively started looking for opportunities outside, because they knew I cannot go through this year not knowing what's going to happen. That's too much pressure. At this point, I just want to get out. And that was then, okay, cool. How can I help? How can I support you best in that endeavor, right? If you say, like, this is the way you want to go, you're sure, what can I do as your manager to help you, right? And that could be mock interviews, writing a recommendation, whatever have you, right? With the rest of the team, we sat down and said, like, okay, so if you aim at staying at Blizzard, right? Let's assume community as you know today does no longer exist in the future, right? What are some other teams and responsibilities and challenges that you're interested in, right? And then everybody came up with their own unique things that were important to them. And we said, okay, cool. What can we do right now to enhance those skills so that if this comes to pass and you have to move to marketing, or you want to move to marketing from community, you have something under your belt that you can show you can actually do that new job as well, right? And that's what I did with the other half of the team on an individual basis for the first round of layoffs. When it then comes to the second one, where it was clear Blizzard is going to be no more, I think I learned from that first experience, and I sat down with everybody individually, and we embraced this coaching approach, right? And I asked them, okay, so we're still getting paid for a year, we're still doing our jobs, we're still doing them well, but every minute we have on top of that goes into your personal development. And that means clarity, understanding of where you are right now. This is going to end. There's no way around it. So where do you want to go from there? And what is the path, the stepping stones between here and there that will get you to that brighter future, right? And again, it was everybody at their own pace, but we then really focused on building that up for every individual. And in addition to that, I also started doing some like leadership workshops with my team, so that with a group of people that they knew and trusted, they could also exchange on the topic and build that resilience and realm of possibility together for how they can move forward from here, right? So we shifted from this is a nightmare and completely devastating to all these options that are out there, all the opportunities that I could move towards to, like, oh, I'm so excited. Where do I want to go first, right?
Right. Yeah.
and that's what we focused on at that stage. Yeah.
I mean, that is amazing and so incredible, because I mean, everyone should have a Benedikt basically as their team leader, because that is really special that you were able to step into this sort of coach role and really help people to see the benefits. Well, first of all, to kind of assess and kind of support, but then also to eventually be there, not only to support them and coach them along changes, the transitions, those especially who left, but then also those who stayed. And you're like, okay, well, where best can you go, and how can we skill you up, which is fantastic. But then the second rounds, when it was like, okay, everyone is leaving essentially, then wow, like that fact that matters that you just sat them down and did group coaching almost, and was like, okay. So you touched on it. One of the questions I had for you was, although redundancies and restructuring is seen as negative, you obviously were able to turn it into a very positive thing for your team to see the opportunities ahead of them. What other benefits or positive outcomes do you think can come with restructuring and or redundancies at both levels, not only for employees at like more junior and mid levels, but also senior management?
So let's start at the senior management maybe. And there I believe, so if you do it right, it's an opportunity to start over, kinda, right? Like if the reasons that you reduce and force are valid and not only like, oh, we want to make more money and you go away, hush hush, but it's like, oh, there was strategic errors and you needed to refocus on a specific aspect of your business, then this gives you a chance to say like, okay, what we had wasn't sustainable, we couldn't go on. And if we would do that, then everybody would suffer. We need to realign and refocus, right? And that's an opportunity to do that, because all of a sudden everybody is again in this space of, oh, my job title is changing, my responsibilities are changing. Everybody's very keenly aware of that. And if you do it right and you have the proper leadership and enticement, and then you can build something new from the ashes, kinda, right? So there's opportunity in that, and that can be really exciting and empowering. It's not what happened for us, right? But for others, it might be the case. And same as a leader or a manager in that situation, I don't think there's anything harder or more demanding than managing through reduction force and layoffs. And you learn and grow a lot from that. So you are forced to look at the hard questions, right? And you're forced to really reflect on, okay, how can I equip everybody in my team with a mindset, structure, and tools to take care of themselves, right? Because in the end, that's to me what a good leader does, right? Like a good leader doesn't look over your shoulder and tell you what to do, but they make sure you're the best, most awesome version of yourself, that no matter what comes your way, you'll be fine and you'll be thriving. And that's for me what leadership is all about, right? And the restructure or reduction force really forces you to get into the nitty-gritty of that. So even if opportunity is not the most, not the best thing to happen in the moment, in the long term, it equips you with really meaningful tools that help you build that resilience in the long term as well. And as an employee, and same for me then as well, it really forced me to reconsider, what are my values? What are my priorities? Because so at Blizzard over the years, so the climate and the culture changed as well, right? Like it really started out as this bunch of gamers making awesome games for other gamers. And then it became more and more corporate into how do we make more money out of this feature and of this launch, right? And to me, it forced me to reassess, okay, do I want to jump into the next best managerial position at another company to help make rich people even richer? Or do I want to do something else with my life, right? And for me, it was like, hey, this is a great opportunity actually to get some certifications in coaching. I just seen how powerful it can be, right? So I went out there and got executive coaching, mental health, and corporate well-being diploma, right? And I started coaching people pro bono in a nonprofit while we were going through that, in addition to the team. And I really fell in love with this, being able to help people outside of a corporate structure, right? Because then you had way more freedom in with whom you work and how you work, instead of being beholden to your corporate overlord, making sure the millionaires get even richer and you get your fair share and you have a good income, right? But the purpose is completely different once you make that transition to be your own boss and work towards what's important to you, right? And that I'll be forever thankful for, because that put me on the trajectory that I'm on now. And if that wouldn't have happened, I value safety a lot personally, right? So I probably would not have lived Blizzard anytime soon, right? And I might have been less fulfilled and overall, less engaged in my work year after year, because more and more would be missing. And now it forced me to actually do something about it and become active instead of just sticking in my comfort zone and waiting for the end at some point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very good mindset that you have adapted, particularly with your own circumstances and reflecting on your own sense of when this happened to you as an employee, manager. You had a team, but nevertheless, it still forced you to also reconsider your values and also, take a step back and look back at, your trajectory in the past and also what it meant for the future, which is really fascinating. Obviously, you're very self-aware. So let me ask you, if we're getting into, because it sounds like what we are, again, talking about today is this idea of building resilience. And that is in large part how you learned almost to build resilience in your own career through this huge transitional period. So when we're talking about, because I'd like to get into so how do we actually do it now? Let's talk about how we actually start and step-by-step process. But before we do, why don't you define to the listeners, how do you define resilience? And what does that mean to you, particularly in your career?
Mm-hmm. So for me personally, so what I've heard often from others, like when they talk about resilience, and for them it's becoming a dirty word because to them it's like resilience, like if you're in a toxic work environment, like, yeah, you have to deal with it, you have to get through it somehow. It's like, no, that's not it, right? Putting up with a toxic work environment or boss or team members, you're sacrificing your own health and well-being on the altar of the corporation or the team or whatever, right? It's not what resilience is about. Resilience to me is really about how we deal with setbacks and how we come back from them, right? And first and foremost, understanding that setbacks are never permanent, nor pervasive, nor personal, but they are always temporary, specific to our situation, and not targeted at us as individuals, right? Because when we're in that situation and we are being told you're being let go, it's the most personal thing in the world, right? And they go, oh no, like I'll never come back from that. This was my life and everything is crumbling. It's like, no, this is one specific event in your life, and it actually, like, down the line opens up opportunities, and it kind of forces you to go out of your comfort zone, and then there's where resilience comes in. If you're resilient, you start pushing against that comfort zone as a habit, basically. That when something like that happens, you're not completely lost, but you're like, okay, good. And like we trained for that kind of feeling, right? And that's then where the resilience kicks in. So, but yeah, first off, for the definition, this is how I would see resilience before we now go into the step-by-step stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. And it's really, I agree 100% because you're absolutely right. Like bad behavior in a work environment and sticking it out is not resilient. It is quite the opposite. I always think, I mentioned this before in one of the season 1, very early episode. And I had a very toxic work environment at one point. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, I'm like tough, I'm sticking it out. But then in some ways I felt like I had betrayed myself. I betrayed my sense of self-worth by sticking it out. So in one way I thought, oh, I'm so resilient, but actually it wasn't. It was a betrayal. And then it manifested with me emotionally eating. Do you see what I'm like? So actually I think, yeah, I like that you've kind of honed in the definition of resilience. And I like that a lot. So, okay, so let's talk about, a step-by-step process, for listeners who want to start building resilience. Like, let's take 2 instances. One where, someone either has their job or they have their business, right? How do we start building resilience in those instances where there's not necessarily a sense of urgency per se to do it? It's more preventative. And then secondly, if someone is listening who is going through this, how can they start to, build the resilience, even though maybe they feel like they're, really at a low point right now?
So where I would always start is, like, let's say we're in the second example where you have been laid off or you are under the gun and you need to find a new job. The first thing is you need to be kind to yourself, right? Like, as we said, like layoffs are never targeted at a person, always at a set of responsibilities, right? So it's not your fault that your company is going through that and you're being laid off, right? So that's where this kindness is paramount, because else when you start judging yourself and telling yourself, oh, you idiot, and what have you done? And if I only had done this, and that it's like you go down this rabbit hole and there's no actionable path. There's no, there's no constructive way forward from that. So first off, and for me, is always having that kindness for yourself, right? And that's also now in the first case, if we are in a safe space right now, or we're doing our thing, right? And we're doing well, but we ask ourselves, okay, how can I be kind to my future self who might run into being laid off, right? What can I do right now to prepare future me for that eventuality? Because it's a very real eventuality, especially in the tech sector where I'm active. There's a lot of people being made redundant everywhere. So, and what we can then do is ask ourselves, okay, if I lose my job tomorrow, like, how do I feel about that? And then if you feel afraid and panicked and have anxiety, the good news, that means you have room to build up your resilience. If you think about that and you feel like the sense of adventure and this is exciting and all these places I will go, then also good news, resilience is already in a good place. So whatever the way, good news all around.
Yeah.
And then the important part is, so we then become aware of, okay, what does it mean if I lose my job, right? Or what can I do to influence that in another way? So when we are in a specific environment, that means we can look at what complementary skills can I get, right? Let's say you're really good at what you're doing already and there's not much else to do. Like, what other skills can I get in that field or connected field to make myself more valuable, right? This way we can influence that the decision makers don't want to get rid of us because we're a really good high performer, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't give us 100% control though. So another way is if you realize, like the climate is changing, the culture is not what it was anymore, don't have this false sense of loyalty where you, as you said, you have to feel I have to stick it out. Like, I'm so resilient, like I'm going through the ringers with the company and I'm the best employee ever. Like, no, look at opportunities outside of the company, right? You have a great skill set, you're great at what you're doing and you're having a job. Now is the best time to look for a better fit if you so choose, right? So don't be afraid to don't put your company on a pedestal and say like, I'm in my comfort zone and this is fine, and then wait for something to break and crush that comfort zone, right? So be proactive about it. Look around, start networking with people on LinkedIn or at events, right? Anything that pushes you slowly but steadily a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So even if you only talk with people in other companies and then there's reduction in force, you already have a point of contact in that other company. So like, hey, how's it looking for you guys? Are you hiring? Like, I'd be really interested in talking about opportunity X, Y, and Z. And like, oh yeah, cool. Would be so glad to have you. And then it's a completely different than you going into their, hey, I'm a complete stranger to you. What do I have to do to get into your company, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a number one thing that we can do in either case, right? Really be present with like, what if I lose my job tomorrow? What can I do right now to soften the blow and increase my chances of finding something or doing something that is in line with my values? And that again brings us back to what I said, where I was forced to reevaluating my values and beliefs and goals. Just do that proactively. Don't wait for your company to close, right?
Yeah. And then going back to the person, let's say if they have lost their job and they're currently in the redundancy, what steps would you recommend they start taking right now in terms of, building that resilience or building back, let's say, resilience?
So it's really then looking at, okay, where am I right now, and also how much leeway do I have to find something new, right? Like if you really need to have a job ASAP, don't try aiming for your dream job, right? Like aim for something that in the interim pays the bills, that you can keep going and keep preparing and improving yourself for that dream job, right? So it's always easy when you talk to life or career coaches. It's like, hey, what is your ultimate goal, right? And we work towards that. And that's completely right. But along the way to getting that dream job might be a job that is okay and pays the bills. And while you're in that job, you remove that pressure of needing to find something immediately, because maybe you have 3 kids you need to take care of, right? And it's really, don't close yourself off too much to opportunities that are not like your ideal choice. Like also look at stuff in the near future that is okay. And so when then comes to resilience specifically and how to build it up. So first, again, we need to be kind to ourselves and say like, hey, I am in a challenging position. It's okay to be afraid. Like this emotion is here not to get me down, but it's your body talking to you. It's letting you know this is something important to you, right? This is why you're afraid, because you need to take care of your kids or yourself or whoever. So that emotion is nothing bad. You don't need to try to run or hide from it or extinguish it, but accept it as that voice that it is, that tries to help you and put you and say like, hey, this is important. Yeah, what are we doing about this, right? So it's more of a partner than an enemy, that anxiety that can creep up, right? And that for me is the first part. And then it's again all about being present. What are my skills right now? How can I improve these skills? Who do I know? How can I improve that? What is needed in that job that I'm aiming for? Or do I want to create my own thing? If I create my own thing, how do I set myself apart from everybody else who is doing X, Y, Z, right? Like, what is my niche that I can explore? And what are the different avenues of revenue that I can make from that, right? So there's a whole bunch of things to consider, and that's why you have career coaches and other things, because that will take time, right? Don't expect to solve that overnight, because it's impossible. But you need to be open to building that future one step at a time, right? So the way that I see it, you want to become that person who, due to the quality of their knowledge and skills and mindsets and behavior, are the person that solves these problems for you, basically, right? Just by being themselves. And your goal is to become one step at a time to become that person. And so you need to be open to the process and not trying to force stuff overnight, but understand that great change is an accumulation of small iterative change.
Oh, I like that. That's very good. I always think that change and little steps that we take compound over time. So this is the same idea that, you know, small changes you can make now will help you in the future. So if, let's say on the resilience point, though, we talked about employees who are like a little bit more maybe junior, mid-level, and maybe even senior, but then we also talked about like management and how they, you know, people also at that level. What about business owners, let's say, who are facing, let's say, small business owners, you know, coaches, whatever, you know, these sort of small businesses? How can they, let's say, build resilience because they're operating in a little bit more of a different environment where it feels like everything rests on them in some ways? Do you have any advice for listeners who are small business owners?
Sure. Like if anybody has an ultimate answer here, I'm also happy to hear it, right? Because I'm in the same situation and I will not have the perfect answer, but I can share what works for me, right?
Yeah.
And that is, so if you have your own business, you have to do everything, right? From the marketing, outreach, networking, creating the content, delivery, whatnot, depending on what you do. And here, what I found the most intriguing is again, this idea of complementary skill sets, right? Like if you are somewhat okay at animation and you're somewhat okay at storytelling, if you put together animated YouTube videos on a specific topic that nobody else does, you might gain a huge following, right? You're not the best in either, but together you fill a niche that was unfilled before, right? And that's really interesting to look at, because if you go out and say like, hey, I'm going to be a life coach or whatever, right? And they're like, yeah, good luck. Because if you don't have any specific niche or approach, there's all these gurus, for lack of better terms, that I personally am not a big fan of, because they give you the vibe, oh, only I can solve your problem, right?
Right.
And it's not what coaching is about for me.
Yeah.
But in that environment, if you try to break into that and become the next guru or whatever, first, I wouldn't recommend that, because to me it's dishonest. But you would need a very specific point of entry or a very specific niche that sets you apart from the rest, right?
Yes.
But the same if you have a service provider and say like, hey, let's do career coaching or executive coaching or what have you, then what works for me, for example, because I struggle a little bit with like, yes, you need to find your niche and distinguish yourself in it. Like where I kind of found my niche a little bit for myself is I really want to work with passionate people. Like, and for me, passionate people or geeks, how I like to call them, is really people who are unapologetic about what they love and they embrace it and they show it to the world. And that's what, for me, what geeks are all about, right? And that's why my tagline is "Coach to the Geeks."
Oh, is
right?
it? Okay, yeah.
But it's not only targeted at gamers and nerds or whatever, but really people who embrace their passion and go full throttle with it, right? Might be a banker, like if they're like, finance is the coolest thing ever, like right? So so in that sense, it's really evaluate and test with friends and family and clients what resonates with them. Like try to identify what is your ideal client. Put it into a statement to like, I help this ideal client deal with this specific challenge by doing this specific thing. Like you need to nail it down. You need to meet the people where they are, right? Like everybody seeks a service provider or a solution because they have a specific problem. If you're out there and you're like, hey, I have the general solution to everything, might be awesome, but nobody's going to pay any attention to you because they're looking for somebody to fix their specific problem right here, right now. So that is really what I've learned the most in the past couple of years is, even though it feels counterintuitive to me, you need to create a niche somewhat for yourself so that people start paying attention to you, right? But once you picked them up where they are, or you met them where they are, then you can open up this entire world to them of like, oh, and now you can, all the places you can go from here, right?
100%.
And the skills of resilience then also is not only for your workplace, right? And how to find employment. It might also be there's an unfortunate event in your life, right? Like might be a personal injury, might be somebody close to you falling ill or even dying, right? And then the principles behind it remain the same, right? By being like present with like, this is stuff that can and will happen at some point. And instead by being blindsided by it, what can I do right now to make the best of it? And that might be just, I'm spending more time with my friends and family because I want to enjoy every minute that I have with them, right? That could be as simple as that. And so it's like this resilience thing, right? It's a very small thing. But it applies to so many things, right?
100%.
And
I also feel like, I think those are such great advice, and for people starting businesses, but also, as you're progressing, the good thing with being a business owner, at least from my understanding, is that, you are much more in control of your time. So this idea of preventatively, spending, curating or carving out more time with your family and friends is amazing because you have that flexibility to do that. Another thing that came to mind when you were speaking, just of, again, my own idea in terms of if there's business owners, what I have heard from speaking with different people is that masterminds are really helpful to build resilience, because mastermind groups tend to help. Like, let's say you are in a group where there's like a mix of professionals, there's like maybe a lawyer involved in there. It's a skill set. And so everyone is helping in this mastermind. Everyone is helping each other. Everyone is helping each other reach their goals. So if you're in a mastermind and you're with like a business person, a lawyer, an accountant or whatever, or you're all business owners, if you meet on a regular basis and you're kind of like, I'm having this issue, I don't know what to do. Someone in that group might say, actually, I know someone who can help you, and so on. So that can kind of build resilience when small business owners are facing individual like issues with their own business. That's something that I just thought of, because I have heard those are amazing. So
definitely. So 100% agree with that. Like, what worked for me was really partnering up with former colleagues of mine, basically, who are in the same space, and just, you don't even have to like say like, oh, I have a problem with this and that. But for example, we worked then together on our leadership program, right? And just by presenting it to them and speaking out loud, you realize, this I can do better, right? And then they come in with their insights, have a different point of view. It's like, oh, this is awesome. We can put that here. And then together, like the content that you're working on gets so much better just through this activity of exchange, right? You don't even need to go there with a problem. You just need to talk about the stuff that you're both excited about, and then it automatically gets better. And just being open to that process, I found immensely helpful. And then, having a support network in my case, it's the coaches that I did my certifications with, right? We're still connected on WhatsApp and LinkedIn, and then just doing a catch-up call with them every now and then, like, hey, how's it going for you? This is what's happening for me. And then you realize, we're all going through the same problems, right? Or have the same challenges, like how to like reach out to clients and convert them without being too pushy or salesy. But at the same time, making sure you have a steady income as much as possible, instead of this feast or famine dynamic that can quickly happen when you work with bigger companies, because there's usually not one decision maker, but many. And then like, oh, our budget shifted, or whatever, right? And then it's 3-4 months later before you actually do something with them. So
that's great. And what is the big three framework, which we talked about? Can you tell the listeners about this?
Definitely. So we kind of already spoiled it. So the big three, to me, so they are a holistic approach instead of trying to provide a partial solution. And it's, in whatever I do nowadays, I always try to be kind, present, and open. And those are the big three. And I use it in my coaching practice. I use it in my leadership workshops. I use it with my wife. I use it becoming a dad in 3 months when everything goes according to plan.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so breaking those three things down, being kind is really all about self-acceptance and acknowledging that we have value and potential, and not only ourselves, but also other people. And to me, like, if you have that picture of the airplane emergency, you first need to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help anybody else. And that's really what exemplifies being kind in that sense to me, because we first need to take care of ourselves, invest into our own well-being and our own development, self-directed change that we want to put out there, becoming the person we want to become before we can assist and elevate others, right? So that's what being kind is all about. Then being present is all about what's going on with me right now, emotions, events, else, and also the people around me, the people that are important to me. Maybe the person that just snapped at me at the Starbucks, they are angry because they have a problem at home, right? So let's not rush to judgment, but give them the benefit of the doubt and be kind with them as well, because we don't know what's going on in their life. We have limited information, right?
Yeah.
And for ourselves, it's really this aspect of mindfulness and like trying to understand what do our emotions want to tell us, right? And not labeling emotions as good or bad, but they all have something to say. As we said, being afraid for our safety or for our kid, or becoming anxious because our place of work is unsafe. Yes, it doesn't feel good, but it tells you that this is something that is important to you, that you can provide for your family, that you have fulfillment in your life, right? So take it as the goodwill communication attempt that it is, and don't judge it harshly, but be present with what's going on in your life right now, and what are all the options out there, right? That where you can move on from here. What's your ultimate goal? What are your values? How can you connect those? And then, and being open is all about putting the change into action, right? So now that we have this clarity, now that we have this insight, what are the small iterative steps that we can do to step by step become that version of ourselves that achieves all these great things that we want for ourselves, as simply as a consequence of who they are. So in a sense, the big three teach us how to become our best leader, to get us through adversity, and also empower and help others to do the same. And that's what I really love about it, because it helped me get through these challenges at work, reduction in force, creating my own company, but then also earlier than that, it's how I met and married the love of my life, right? Because I at some point decided, okay, like if I sit here and wait for my life partner, it's never going to happen, right? So I went onto different apps and made it a hobby to go onto dates, right? So I gamified it for myself. And then I knew now it's only a matter of time. It's a numbers game at this point until I meet the right person that resonates with me on the right frequency, right? And that's exactly what happened. But I needed to put myself out there. I needed to be open to step out of my comfort zone and put that change out there. Else, if we only have the intent and no action, there's no result that comes from it, right? So, and that's really what I love about this framework, because it has worked for me in so many areas of my life and keeps delivering. And I'm very excited to be using it as a dad as well, and see how that pans out.
I love that.
So,
that's amazing. So be kind, be present, and be open. That's
yes.
the big three. Love that. That's amazing. I didn't know that about your wife, but that is a beautiful story. And yeah, amazing. And since she's expecting, so in 3 months, you're going to be a dad.
Yes. So if the kid is on time, it's in 3 months. Yes.
Congratulations. Oh, that's amazing. Well, we'll definitely be checking in and wishing you well, of course, and the new baby. Okay, so thank you again for that. That was really helpful. I think now we're going to move on to the EnvisionAir questionnaire, which is the final segment of the podcast. And this is where we ask guests to reflect on their past, consider their present, and look to the future. So again, very looking towards your past. What is one piece of advice you would have given your 15-year-old self?
Okay, so the nerd in me would be very careful right now, because I don't want to jinx the outcome that my life right now changes. So like if I give my past self such good advice that they go in a completely different trajectory and I never meet my wife, that sucks. I don't want to do that, right? So so I don't, because I'm very happy in the state of the life that I have right now. But I think the one thing that I can tell myself would be to not be so harsh on myself. Like I had a hard time loving myself, basically, or accepting myself. Like when it comes to kindness, right? Like self-acceptance. Like I had a time in my life, especially around that age, where I thought like, hey, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not funny enough, I'm not athletic enough, or whatever, to deserve a partner, right? And that really followed me through long years into my adult life as well. But ultimately, it led me to the road that I'm on, and I met my wife. So it all ended well, right? But I think I could have spared myself some suffering by being kind, present, and open with myself earlier in my life. And that's where I really also hope that this message can reach younger audiences, like especially as they're about to go into the workforce, to have a more healthy approach to their own well-being, but also how to forge their own path in a self-directed manner, and not waiting for something to happen that forces them to reevaluate and take a look at things, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great advice. And we definitely have some younger listeners, definitely, that I know. So I think this is definitely going to help them for sure. And what is something that you are grateful for looking at your present?
Yeah, so many things. So my wife, the kids that's on the way, my family, my friends, they're all awesome. Like even this experience of creating my own company, while it can be scary at times, it's also super exciting at other times. And then you realize excitement and being scared are just two sides of the same coin. It's just rampant energy in your body, right? But right now, it's super exciting because, I get to do fun stuff like this, like be on your podcast and talk about things that are important to me, right? And that's really having this opportunity. I wouldn't be here right now if I would still be with Blizzard, right? Because then my life would have taken a different trajectory. So I'm very happy for that weird, bad, good event in my life, right? Because it really forced me to take a close look at what is it that I actually want from life and how do I want to go about it. And it opened up so many different opportunities. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Amazing. Beautiful. And what's one goal that you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
So in the next 5 years, so definitely solidifying my business and or deciding to go back into the corporate world as well, because I don't know what the future holds. Like the one thing that I do know, the one goal that I want to achieve within the next year is just being a good dad and learning how to do that. And currently thinking about, because I'm fortunate enough that I saved enough money that I can take a year off from any and all business if I so choose, and just be there with my kid, right? Like being self-employed and having your own company, I sometimes feel I have to be always on, and I just want to be with the kid, right? I just want to be always on, right? And I think that's being kind to myself, but also my kids and my wife, because we just can spend more time together. And I might get even more insights of what really resonates with me, and adjust my business accordingly down the road, right? So I think like taking that opportunity and saying very consciously no to business for at least 6 to 12 months is something that I want to do and experience and see what that is all about. Because raising tiny humans, I think it's a ultimate leadership challenge. So
I love that. I've never heard that being described that way, but that is a good way to describe it for sure. Oh, I love that. Well, we'll check in with you in the next 6 months, see how you're doing.
Oh, definitely. I would appreciate it. Yes.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, where can listeners get in contact with you and learn more about what you're doing? And if they want to get some coaching, how do they get in contact with you?
So the easiest way is just look me up on LinkedIn. It's Benedikt Oehmen, Oehmen, or shoot me an email at oehmenbenedikt@gmail.com. And if you're interested in like what we talked about today and want to get a little bit better of a glimpse of how we put the big three into practice, you can go to my website, specifically the part with the free stuff on it. And you can find it under tiny.cc/big-3-goodies, so big 3 goodies. And there you not only find my book, which is free of charge, a free PDF where you can learn more about my life and my philosophy and how we can save the world together, basically.
Yes.
And also workshops that we did implementing the big three for career development. And you can take a look at it, and you can also work along with it. I uploaded the course material as well. And if that sounds interesting to you, just give me a poke and we schedule a free call and we explore how the big three might be beneficial for your career development or for your life in general. And yeah, that's
fantastic
stuff about me.
That's amazing. Well, I'll put everything in the show notes as well, so people can just scroll down and it'll be linked, hyperlinked, so it'll be there. Amazing. Well, thank you again, Benedikt, for being on the EnvisionAir podcast. And thank you to the EnvisionAirs for tuning in. Remember to stay curious, stay open, and keep envisioning your lives with unlimited possibilities. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.